So the first type of a report within Epicor is a BAQ report. Of course, BAQ reports start with a BAQ, which is a business activity query. You create your BAQ and then you use the menu item in Epicor that is called Business Activity Query Designer to create a BAQ report based off of the BAQ that you previously created. Next, you define your report options, filters, and sort options, which each of the sort options includes sort fields as shown here. And those will be shown in the report criteria screen when you run your BAQ report. Epicor helps out by making these parameters and your fields for your report available in the SSRS Report Designer or Visual Studio if you use that to design your reports. So on the left and top right, you can see the SSRS report here. The left picture illustrates that the dataset name BAQ report result is the main dataset and is used for the body of the report. This is the page header and this is the body. Notice also the groups shown at the bottom of the left picture, that there's the details and then we have group 1 and group 2 for the report in this example. The top right shows the dataset name BAQ reports is used, BAQ report parameter is used for the options, filters, and sort by choices. So you can see this dataset BAQ report parameter lists your options and sort by, etc., in addition to other parameter fields too. For example, the filters for employees and departments can be included in the dataset for display on the report. But on this report, the filter for the employee does not display to show which employees were chosen. Instead, we're just showing the filter of the dates there. The bottom right shows the actual report with color codes to match the parameters from the report. So in other words, the report title is here, the sort by is the orange, and options 1 has the dates. And you can see the user ID and the BAQ ID, although it looks like in this case that was taken off, or I don't know, it looks like it's on there. I'm not sure why it's not showing here, but we work with these reports often, so maybe somebody accidentally deleted it or whatever. So next we have the next report type is RDD reports. Most of the Epicor reports are based on report data definition tables and fields. Define your structure, data sources, fields to include, and other items using this menu item. To customize an existing system report, you have to create a copy of the report data definition because you cannot change the ones that are system report data definitions. Then you can add tables as the data sources, which are shown here, the tables, and you can add fields from those data sources to it and remove fields that you don't want shown on your report. Other items can be set up in the report data definition to finish designing the makeup of your data to pull from Epicor. So you can see there's also relationships, report labels, report criteria sets, etc. So here's an example of a report data definition report for the sales order pick list. For Epicor created RDD reports, Epicor creates the data set and report parameters also. The second and third picture show the query behind the order head data set. So in here, you can see the query is called order head. That's the order head data set. And you can see most of the query here. Really, I highlighted just where it says from to show you that the tables used really are more than just one table. It includes the order head, order detail, order release, job production, and report labels tables too. The non-highlighted area above here is selecting all the fields that are used in the report. The last picture shows where you can add a query field or calculated field. So if you add to the query, if you want to add some of the fields from the existing tables, basically if you added them in the report data definition also, you can add them here in the dataset properties, which is over here, the fields, add, and you can add a calculated field or a query field there. However, to add to the system reports, you need several steps. First, as we talked about, copying the report data definition to make your changes, and then copy the report styles so that you don't overwrite the system report, and that will be in your menu item for report styles, and then add your changes from the RDD also into the dataset query. So as mentioned, you can add fields, or if you need to add tables, you can add tables along with their relationship into the query here. And then the last step will be adding new fields to the body of the report, because if you added the fields, you want to use them on your report somehow. So here's an example of an RDD report, example of a sub-report. So our original report had some sub-reports, and here I'm showing the dataset query and fields for the sub-report named quantity on hand. So the pick list, sales order pick list quantity on hand is the sub-report. And here you can see the parameters linking the main report to the sub-report. And then you can see the data sets that are used in the sub-report are different than what the main report had. But the main one, again, here is called warehouse bin part allocation, but that includes a couple of different tables here. You can see the warehouse bin table, and the part allocation table. And again, you can add fields if you need to add fields to the sub-report by adding them both actually up here to add the fields, and then to add them actually in your report, you need to add them in this part of the dataset properties, and then you can use them on your reports. So here's our reports example. You can see the results of the report on the left with the color-coded sections that relate to the report design on the right. The sales order pick list includes the whole report basically, but the sub-report is the pink part, which shows the quantity on hand based on that we showed on the previous screens. While you can create most business activity query reports using the BAQ report designer, you can also create reports with more complex criteria and filter options based on one or more BAQs using the report data definition maintenance. So for a normal BAQ report designer, Epicor automatically creates a report data definition when you create that report. But when you're going to combine some, you can create your own report data definition. You first enter the parameters you need on the BAQ. You can then link these parameters to criteria sets and filters on the report data definition. Here you can see I have a BAQ with open orders for customers and another BAQ with a customer list. Next, you design the report data definition. I've added the two BAQs to the report data definition. So in your data sources, you have the availability to do BAQs. And here you can see I added the two BAQs. Next, I created a criteria set, and usually I name that as default for the first one. If you had more than one, you can have a second one named something else. And Epicor will show you all your parameters in the criteria mappings area, where you can select them and use the overflow menu to create the prompts for them. Notice I only selected the first 6 mappings. Here you can see they're checked, and from the overflow mapping, I'm saying to create the prompts for those 6. Since the last 4 are using the same prompts, after you create the prompts, the criteria mapping will show them as highlighted in yellow with prompt and control name for the 6 you selected. You'll then need to manually select the control type and control name for the other 4 as shown in pink or purple highlight here that I said what the control type is and what control it's going to use, because it's going to use the same controls that we already created with Epicor creating the prompts. Finally, move to the criteria prompts panel card to reorder the fields if needed for the layout on the print criteria form. So you can put the order in whatever sequence you want. You can type over and then move them around as you need to. And here is a BAQ report data definition example. You'll need to create a new report style that uses the RDD. In general, the report style is likely like most other report styles, except in this area of the report style, you're going to create the report style, and then you also have an area in the report style to fill in that's labeled the report criteria field, which might not appear until you save the report style. So once you save the report style, then it'll appear in the listing that you have an availability of a report criteria. Next, you'll actually create the SSRS report, which Epicor will provide the data sets for, and you will need to design the layouts. So you'll use the overflow from the report style to create your SSRS report, and then you will put your report on a menu item and test it. And notice that at least in Kinetic 2024.1, there is only a classic form for these types of reports. So your report criteria only comes up with the classic form for the RDD, BAQ RDD reports. It may be changed in further versions of Kinetic, but at least in this Kinetic, there's only the classic type. Fill in your criteria that will be used for both BAQs, and then on the right, we can see the results after using the options we filled in. My report has a main report and a sub-report, where the main report is the open customer orders BAQ results, and then the sub-report is the customer list BAQ results. So we link them based on probably the customer name, and you can see then it lists the customer name, address, city, and state in the sub-report. SQL reports is the next type of reports. So in addition to the BAQs and RDDs, you can also create SQL reports if you have access and permissions to do so. Most cloud customers will not have these permissions because you cannot connect to your SSRS to create these queries. But if you do have access, or if you're not a cloud customer, you should have access if your IT person gave you permission, then in SSRS you can use a normal SQL, which stands for Structured Query Language query, or you can also use stored procedures. Here I have an example of a stored procedure and then design design the report using that stored procedure. So a stored procedure is just an SQL query that's saved to run just naming the stored procedure. Most often you'll start SQL reports using Microsoft Report Designer or Visual Studio when you have an SQL or stored procedure rather than starting inside of Epicor. You will also have a different data source for your data sets set up with permissions needed to allow you to connect to SQL. So you can see I have a data source name, data source 1, that has different connections that will give you the connection string needed to connect to SQL. So here's an example of our SQL reports. After you finish designing your report with SQL, you'll need to add a menu item to run the report. The easiest option here is to have a URL link menu item where the URL points directly to that report. And then on the right side, you can see the results of this report that is used based on a stored procedure using SQL. So here we have parts on hand based on SQL, and you can see the URL there listed, and it's put into the menu. Mixed mode reports is the next type. It's also possible to have mixed mode reports where you can combine 2 or more of the listed report types in one final report. This may involve using more than one data source and or sub-reports. My example uses a BAQ report and then a sub-report that uses an SQL query. So you can see the data sources, and in the sub-report we have a different data source because we're connecting to the SQL query, and this is the query in the sub-report. So again, we have a BAQ report that shows order information, and then on the sub-report we're showing the quantity on hand for the parts on that order information. And a parameter for the part number is used to link the 2 reports. So here's the resulting report. The main report are the rows with the yellow highlighted parts, and the sub-report has the pink highlighted parts, which can have multiple rows for the parts if there is on-hand inventory and more than one warehouse bin combination for the part number. Also, the on-hand quantity is sorting descending as shown in the SQL query. Cody seems very interested in studying this report. So now we'll get to listing our pros and cons about each of the different types of reports. Here are some of the pros for each different type. Feel free, as I mentioned, to put any if you want to add to them in the chat window. But here we list them that, for BAQ reports, they're the least complex type, and based on one BAQ, easier to add your options and filters and sort choices right in Epicor, and straightforward to design, formatting, and layout. Epicor creates the data sets for output fields and parameters. For the RDD reports, you have the ability to start with a template, a system report, and make changes for the RDD. And you have the ability to start with a template and make changes also for the SSRS report itself. So those are 2 pros for RDDs. For BAQ RDD reports, you can combine BAQs to get more complex data into your report, and using the criteria sets makes the criteria selection easier. And then we have SQL reports. You may already be familiar designing SQL queries or stored procedures, so that could be a pro, and the report formatting can be created from the ground up, basically. Mixed mode reports gives you alternative flexibility to get data into your report using 2 or more of the above options. Some of the cons for BAQ reports, I guess because it's based on one BAQ or one BAQ with subqueries, so you have a harder time getting your needed data into your report if you have complex needs. RDD reports take some knowledge and experience to understand all the options to design these, as I talked about on that slide, that you need to copy the report data definition, you need to copy the report style, you need to make your changes in the report data definition, you need to make your changes in the SSRS report, and then add your fields to the report, etc. BAQ RDD reports, a con would be that there's additional knowledge and experience needed to design your criteria data sets and the BAQ report data definition itself. SQL reports, one of the cons could be that you don't have the SQL query design knowledge to create an SQL query or stored procedure. And mixed mode reports, some of the cons could be there's different security required for the different data sources set up, and it may be more difficult to determine how to have your data sets work together in one report.